Greetings, everyone. This is Sandra Rowe from the Global Blockchain Business Council. I'm your moderator today, and I have some very esteemed panelists with me to talk about U.S. innovation. I am ecstatic to welcome and also to thank wholeheartedly the University of Arkansas for co-hosting this session and the inaugural session of the USA Innovation Series. I would like to just take a few minutes to read bios as we wait for participants to be admitted into this webinar. So let me start with saying I want to thank Dr. Mary Lassity, who is actually not here with us. She's a professor at the University of Arkansas. She and I have had a very long-term relationship, and we've been very fortunate to participate in the last blockchain hackathon. I was able to visit Fayetteville and see the beautiful campus. So for the University of Arkansas students that are listening in, love your campus, love the people. It was a great experience and so delighted to continue our partnership and collaboration. Further to that, I'm very thankful to Professor Carol Goforth today for making time with us. And obviously she's at the law school. We'll talk more about her in a minute. So thank you again, University of Arkansas, for the partnership and the collaboration as you have done for many years and many years to come. So with that, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists, starting with Representative French Hill. He is a 9th generation Arkansan. I've learned to say that properly. Congressman has represented Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District since January of 2015. He serves as the Vice Chairman of the House Financial Services Committee and Chairman of the 1st Digital Assets Subcommittee. Incredibly important. Elected to the Republican Steering Committee for the 118th Congress and is a member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and House Foreign Affairs Committee. Prior to his congressional service, Congressman Hill was founder, chairman, and CEO of Delta Trust and Banking Corporation. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, Hill actually led the design of the U.S. technical assistance to the emerging economies of Eastern and Central Europe in the areas of banking and securities. In 1991, President Bush appointed Representative Hill to be Executive Secretary to the President's Economic Policy, EPC, where he coordinated all the White House economic policy, after which he was awarded the Distinguished Service Award in 1993 for his leadership and service at the Treasury and the White House. He is a past president of the Rotary Club of Little Rock and served as the 2013 chairman of the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome Representative Hill. Thank you very much. I'm going to just go on to Carol Goforth and Dale for a minute. Carol Goforth, as I mentioned, is a university professor and the Clayton Little Professor of Law at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. She has been a full-time academic since 1989, and in the past 5 years has written more than a dozen articles focused on regulation of crypto assets. She provides regular commentary on crypto regulation and has participated in a number of conferences and academic symposia on the topic. She also she also wrote the first comprehensive textbook on crypto regulation for U.S. law students and others. The second edition of Regulation of Crypto Assets was published by West Academic in May of 2022. I want to welcome Carol. And then finally, but not lastly, Dale Chrystie is Business Fellow and Blockchain Strategist for FedEx based in the Memphis area. He also serves as the chairman of BITA Standards Council, the Blockchain in Transportation Alliance, a member of the Blockchain Research Institute in Toronto, and is also an executive advisory board member of the University of Arkansas Blockchain Center of Excellence. In 2019, he was awarded the inaugural Enterprise Blockchain Award. In the event, he was awarded the Blockchain Apologies, I'm messing that up. The inaugural Enterprise Blockchain Award in Enterprise and Industry Leadership. And in 2022, at the Web3 and Blockchain World event, he was awarded the Blockchain Leadership Award in Advocacy and Education. He is a global thought leader on the business and strategy aspects of Web3, blockchain, and emerging technologies. His focus on co-opetition in the blockchain space continues to challenge conventional wisdom and typical corporate and regulatory culture. And his perspective in that space is well documented in academic and other publications. Dale's career in transportation began more than 30 years ago, and in addition to his work leading the first proof of concept at FedEx using blockchain technology in 2017, he has extensive experience in strategy, quality, process improvement, and standards development, and is a proud graduate of the University of Arkansas. So welcome, everyone. And let's kick off with Representative Hill. Recently, we heard you speak at the Milken Institute's Digital Asset Conference, just about 2 weeks ago, during a fireside chat. And with your recent appointment as the head of Digital Asset Subcommittee, it was great to get your perspective on the legislative landscape and your thought on digital assets in the US from a pragmatic standpoint. Can you just please explain to this audience who may have not heard you speak a couple weeks ago about your viewpoints on where we are and how do we support a vibrant digital assets and blockchain landscape in the US?
Well, Sandra, thank you. And thanks for having me at this great panel. And go Hogs Go. What a great forum. I'm so proud of the University of Arkansas for being a leader in blockchain. And it's great to see my friend, Professor Goforth, and Dale, it's great to meet you digitally. And nobody's been a better partner to the U of A over the decades than FedEx. And, you know, this is a perfect way to combine two of the University of Arkansas's most interesting power centers. One is what Carol's built in distributed ledger, blockchain, crypto-related topics. But the university is terrific in shipping and logistics. FedEx has been at the heart of that, along with Walmart and Tyson Foods and JB Hunt and others. But my point is that, you know, part of the challenge in creating this regulatory framework is demonstrating to members of Congress, investors, the public generally, about the role of Web3 and distributed ledger and blockchain technology. And what better way to do that than demonstrate individual case studies. And that's why in the shipping and logistics inventory control area, something, you know, Dale knows a lot more about than I do, that's a prime area to use it as a communication tool in this. You get into this topic because it's dominated by Bitcoin, the concept of cryptocurrency, and tokenized payments. And people, I call that the trees in the forest. But there are a lot of people on Capitol Hill who want to go cut down one or another of those trees because there's something about it they don't like, and they miss the forest of essentially future of Web3, digital development, fintech, and yeah, sure, digital payments and tokenized payments are a big part of that. But I can't underemphasize that point enough. So my job in this new Congress is to try to bring consensus to the need for a regulatory framework and do that on a bicameral basis, meaning in the House and the Senate, and do it on a bipartisan basis. So let me just take a second and give you, you know, a thumbprint there. First, members of Congress, this is not a particularly new topic. Back in 2018, Bill Foster, Democrat of Chicago, and I wrote Secretary Treasury Mnuchin in the Trump administration, and Jay Powell as chairman, to make sure both the Treasury and the Fed were thinking through this trend, academic trend and research trend, and to some degree practical trend, although I'm not willing to say that yet, about central bank digital currencies, and make sure they knew, gosh, what does this mean? How might it work? How could it work in an American context? What's the impact on monetary policy in the US, retail banking in the US? What's the impact on dollar supremacy in the global trading system? So these are big issues. So we posed those questions back in 2018, and we got kind of, you know, not big enthusiastic engagement on that question. And that's despite the Bank for International Settlements being very active in the IMF. But then Libra happened. And Maxine Waters, the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee at that time, had a series of big, interesting hearings, including presentations by Mark Zuckerberg himself, David Marcus, about what in the world is Facebook up to? What is Libra? How might it work? And that educated the whole committee to the concept of essentially a stable coin like tokenized payment. So our committee is actually pretty well versed in this topic generally, but they're not in what I mentioned previously, which is what is the forest. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to do that. And we'll get into the details during the conversation. But again, thanks for having me participate today.
Well, thank you for obviously the lead in and obviously giving us some background, and we'll delve into some of the concepts that you've mentioned. But I want to go over to Carol to, explain from your point of view. You're one of the leading digital asset academic experts who've participated and witnessed the evolution of this, including academic disinterest, maybe initially, and now interest in blockchain technology and digital assets. Can you share with us some of your observations as you've observed this evolution?
I wouldn't say it was academic disinterest so much as academic confusion. Academics, we have tenure, and so we tend to stick around. And so you have a lot of them that are in my age group. It's really hard to get your head around the idea of how can something that in essence is nothing more than a digitized string of numbers floating around, shared electronically among a bunch of computers that you don't even know where they are. And how can something like that have value? How can it have money? It's just incomprehensible that something like Bitcoin could at its height be trading for $64,000 a coin, or then a few years later back down to 20,000, or today 24,000. So it was just something that was so different. When you hear about this being a disruptive technology, it is disruptive in the sense that it's not quite like anything we've seen before. And I think Representative Hill is spot on when he says that that's the big one. That's the one that makes the headlines, but it is only one application of the underlying blockchain technology that hosts a range of potential applications way beyond the banking payments sphere. So what I am seeing is more people who are coming at this from different avenues. So yes, there are people like me with a securities and a commodities regulation background, but there are also people with a supply side, a supply chain background, being very interested in the potential for having an accurate, very fast, indelible, accessible record of where is that particular asset in the supply chain, or for things like food security, or for sustainability, or for preventing identity theft, or for making sure that we know where is the holdup in delivering the brand new vaccines for the new pandemic or the new issue that's come up in healthcare. So there are so many potential applications. What we are now seeing is this is familiar enough that people understand enough to see the potential applications. So you were seeing more and more people get into this space from different avenues, which I think is just a fantastic thing.
Absolutely. And, this is a conversation. So if anyone wants to chime in, please do. But I will go to our resident supply chain expert here, Dale. You work in an iconic Fortune 500 firm. I doubt there's any American out there that wouldn't know who FedEx is or what FedEx is. Can you just share with us some of your insights in the years that you've been looking at this technology? And do you agree with what French Hill and also, Representative Hill and also Carol Goforth have said?
Well, good day, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. It's an honor to be part of this, and I enthusiastically agree with both of the previous comments. I just had to stay seated and not just go like this to several of these comments. So I stayed seated to stay on camera. I'm on the business and strategy side of things. I led our first use case at FedEx in 2017, early 2017. We were trying to solve a business issue involving claims where a receiver and a shipper and a carrier were essentially all speaking different data languages. And it caused friction and many millions of dollars a year in waste. So we didn't start on the technology side, try to say, this is great, cool, kind of sexy technology. We were trying to solve a business issue. And I think that's important for this to scale moving forward, is it's not about the technology, it's really about the why of blockchain. And we can come back to that. At FedEx, while most people may think of us as a carrier, or I ordered something and it was delivered by FedEx, we think of ourselves as a technology company. And by 2018, our executives were already publicly discussing blockchain as something that would completely change and transform worldwide supply chains. From our thinking, when you stop innovating, you're really in the process of commoditization at best and extinction more probably. And by 2019, we publicly said that it would take a global village, a pro-competitive, what I refer to as co-opetition, to scale blockchain, and that no single entity could own it. From a FedEx point of view, for it to scale, we said it would have to be much bigger than us. And that, again, led me to kind of referring to blockchain as a co-opetition. Co-opetition is not about where we compete, it's about where we can agree. For example, reducing friction across borders benefits everyone.
Thank you for that, Dale. And we'll dive a bit deeper into what you believe, what we need to do to really scale and take things to grow the pie bigger for everyone. But I want to go back to Representative Hill. I think you mentioned, it's not a new topic. People in Congress have actually now been fairly well acquainted with different aspects of digital assets. But on the supply chain side, in terms of looking at the forest, as you've mentioned, what do we need to do? How is Congress's understanding of the other applications that are out there?
I think okay on an anecdotal basis, maybe. And I always credit, I told Steve Forbes this a couple of weeks ago when we were on a panel together. As a general reader of business publications, I've always appreciated Forbes, particularly following on a quarterly basis or whatever, what bigger companies, but entrepreneurs too, they have a whole section on crypto innovation and the venture capital piece. But I really like their compendium where they walk through essentially the Fortune 500 and what are they doing specifically about potentially integrating blockchain into their, ordinary business practices to solve business problems, just as Dale outlined. I think we need to have more engagement like that in each congressional district of talking to people about blockchain first and essentially Web3, distributed ledger, and do that education almost on, hey, this is a company that's in Memphis. It happens to be a global enterprise, but let me talk to the members of Congress that are in and around that area and talk to them about this so that we break down that barrier. And then we can end up saying, sure, at a node to complete a transaction on blockchain or a smart contract, we may well have a tokenized payment. But I'd love Carol's perspective on this. It's not required that it be a tokenized payment. I can terminate an investment contract, and fulfill it in a number of ways. And I think, again, this is sort of lost on folks. What we've started in Congress is, yes, we're in the financial services business. So we have been talking on a bipartisan basis of regulation around a payment, a payment stable coin, because that's our committee jurisdiction. It
Right.
speaks to a lot of the confusing issues that relate to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission oversight versus a bank regulator. So that's where we've started. But I don't think that's necessarily where you start when you educate the public.
It's a great point. Carol, would you like to chime in? I think you're absolutely correct on we need to widen the scope and people need to see in practice the problems that are being solved and the examples of the problems that are being solved with this tech. But Carol, over to you.
Yeah, I think that the general population today gets a distressing amount of their information not from business publications, not from the Wall Street Journal, but from social media and their friends and their posts on Facebook and things that grab their attention. And the headlines that grab attention are crypto is for criminals, crypto is rife with fraud. Chairman Gensler of the SEC says that this is the Wild West and it's completely unregulated. And the reality is far different from that. But a bigger piece is that crypto and blockchain, it is way bigger than the aspects that make the headlines, that grab the attention. So what I would really like to see is innovation in a form that is immediately accessible and beneficial and obvious to the ordinary person. So innovation, for example, if we could find a way to move all of our deeds and records from those old musty books in the record keeping and the filing offices, and we could put some of those records, we could digitize them and put them on the blockchain, making it possible, much easier to validate chain of title and accessible without necessarily having to go and get title insurance every time you do a mortgage. And individual people could see, oh, blockchain is more than just that crypto that I thought was, a scam. And so I would really like to see an application that has widespread, immediate benefits for the public, not just tangential down the road, filtering through big companies. And honestly, that's only going to come if we have entrepreneurs that feel comfortable venturing into the space, which requires a clarity of regulation that I think to date has been lacking.
Yeah, I'd pitch in just on that. I mean, I think you go back to the Libra conversation about Facebook, for example. If you'd had a framework where it was already a regulatory sort of certainty that a non-bank could enter into a new payment rail, still touching the banking system, in theory, we can debate about that. But let's just hear me out on the hypothesis. I don't think that would have been, the shocker that it was. And Facebook was way out ahead of the curve on this. I don't think they'd gotten their homework finished. I think it's almost like a press release announcement as opposed to a serious completed implementation strategy, because they were going to be in Switzerland and they were going to do this and they were going to do that. It was confusing to people. But what did they testify to? Well, they testified to that with 1 billion users, they felt like they could reduce agency costs, particularly in remittances, where a family has a green card in the United States, they're sending money home to their relatives in Mexico, and you're talking 7 or 8% cost all in, both fees associated with it plus the currency translation. Right. So there was a prime example that Libra pitched out there and said, here, this is a problem, like Dale noted, that we're trying to solve for cross-border consumers. Mm-hmm. But the regulatory framework wasn't there to have the conversation. And then you have the whole group of people that don't want to grant Facebook any more of a monopolistic, environment than they already have. And so it broke down there, but it doesn't mean it was, quote, a bad idea.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, Dale, turning to the transportation space, what do you see as promising blockchain and potentially tokenization applications? And what do we need to do? And can you talk a little bit about your work with BITA Standards Council?
Sure. Just going backwards just for a second there, it's an interesting, it would take a much more, a longer session than this to go into that. But essentially, it was a Web 2 company, Facebook, trying to jump into the Web 3 space. So you've got a Web 2 world that doesn't have an identity layer and a company saying, I'm limited to how big I can get, but there's a lot more people out here under some set of circumstances. Let me jump to that space. And I agree with the representative that I don't know that the homework was done well. Certainly it flew against many of the regulations and financial things, institutions that were already established and things like that. From our point of view, most industries are still focused on Web 2 technology that's existed for 20 years or more, or so maybe. And they keep getting better at doing things that they've already done. There are people in our side of things that are starting to lean into Web3 with a blockchain foundation, but most examples are still early. I want to speak about AI and sensors for just a second. AI is going to be everywhere, but it will be better with the exhaust, the word I use is exhaust, of blockchain and IoT data powering its analytics, optimization, predictive, and prescriptive models. We've been tracking packages since the early 80s. I mean, our founder, our iconic founder, Fred Smith, said in 1978, the information about the package is as important as the package itself. There's nobody that was thinking about those things in 1978. And yet here we are finally at the point where we can all better and better understand the importance of that data. And a few years later, we started tracking packages, and we were the first to do so. So, that gets us to, as consumers, pickup, origin hub, it's out for delivery, I'm going to get my package, whatever the case may be. IoT devices give us a ton more data, a lot more data about where the package is currently. Not only was it at the hub 2 hours ago, but it is at the hub and it's sitting right there. But it's not until we get to blockchain that we actually glue all those data points together to get to the full story of the provenance of that item. And now you can actually get to the point of, is this a Sandra original, and can you prove it? And we think that's going to be a big deal moving forward. And the combination of these technologies, blockchain and IoT, we think will transform global supply chains.
I love that, Dale. The point that you made about not only do you have all this data now, but actually what's real, what's not, and actually mitigating risk around fakes and just a whole plenary of things that are actually risk management. And so when I tell people actually blockchain technology is a risk mitigation, risk management tool, eyes glaze over, but I fundamentally am there with you that actually that's what it does. It sounds boring, but kind of like it that way. Carol, can you speak a little bit about University of Arkansas has really been leading in so many areas. And I think this sort of pragmatism and also priming your students to understand that the world that's unfolding, happening now and going into the future, I think University of Arkansas is doing a great job. Can you talk a bit more about sort of what you're doing with your students and as well as what you're seeing on campus?
My role is in helping train lawyers to understand the regulatory environment so that when they go out and become practitioners and they have a client who wants to be in the space, they understand the concepts, the terminology. One of the problems that existed before we started academics started understanding this is that not only is it a new technology, it's a technology and it's an application that crosses a number of different traditional areas. So to understand crypto assets, you have to understand banking and payments, and you have to understand the securities aspect and the commodities aspect. And you can't be afraid of the tax ramifications. And then there's the state level set of laws and regulations, money transmitters, and issues relevant to that. And on top of that, because this is inherently transglobal, because you can't locate one of these assets, it's got an international ramification. So training law students to be prepared to handle all of that is sort of where I fit in. The university itself also has classes in programming and blockchain technology. We run the blockchain hackathon where students actually get to do some programming and hear speakers from around the globe. And we have a Web3 conference. We have classes for our undergrads, our graduate students, our honors students, interdisciplinary. So it's folks from engineering and business and from any other part of the university that wants to be a part of that space. And we are in the process of sort of reconfiguring the Blockchain Center of Excellence. And my understanding is that we're going to probably move that to the entrepreneurship and innovation side of things and have a way to facilitate discussions with entrepreneurs and startups and those who want to be involved in providing services in the Web3 space, either sort of freestanding or in conjunction with or in partnership with larger enterprises that have a problem and they want to work with partners to solve that problem, potentially using Web3 applications. So all of that is happening right here at the University of Arkansas.
Amazing. I see, Dale, you've spoken at the University of Arkansas several times. I have a feeling, Representative Hill, you'll be getting the next invite for the next Web3 conference. I have to say it's been great to see what's happening at the University of Arkansas, and I think we need to encourage more universities around the country to be doing similarly, to also support students who are embarking upon this next decade of innovation. I want to go back to Representative Hill and talk a little bit about the US dollar. And you mentioned CBDC, and you've definitely given us a bit of background about what happened with Libra that got a lot of people's attentions. In terms of where we are, what do you think are really the risks of a US CBDC and benefits, of course? And do you think that a CBDC might take away the private sector's ability to innovate and continue to develop their own? Would be great to just get some of your initial views on that.
Thanks, Sandra, because that's, again, a major topic that's been flowing through the Washington salons of debate on this topic. I told you about my view that it should be studied, analyzed, and the impact on banking, the impact on consumers, the impact on monetary policy, and then the impact about how it would interconnect around the world and relate to the fact that we have, since World War II, the dollar is the predominant currency for global transactions. And there's nothing that makes that an inevitability. You can talk to the British in the 1920s or others prior to that, the French or the Portuguese or the Spanish. They were all currencies that were at the margin, the global currency. So why is the dollar? Well, first of all, it's development post-World War II, and oil is denominated in it. And we were a rules-based economy with an exchangeable, a fully exchangeable currency. And we have courts that can adjudicate claims, and a lot of these other countries don't have that, or they're very burdensome, like the euro, for example. So we want to make sure that the 21st century dollar dominates. And so what role might a CBDC play in there? Pros and cons. You have some on the left that think this is some sort of a, financial nirvana activity here, where suddenly, if we had a US central bank digital currency, everyone would be included, all would be equal, and the world would be, this happy, better place with people just doing business directly at the Fed as a consumer. Who needs a bank? We're going to just bank at the Fed. We're going to credit your income there. We're going to debit you for taxes. We're going to credit your food stamps there. It's just everything. It's a beautiful, harmonious activity. Some on the right say, oh my God, this is the Chinese surveillance state. You're playing right into the hands of the lunatics out there in society that are going to spy on you and destroy all remnants of privacy. It's unconstitutional, etc. So, point one. Most people in Congress do not believe, this is bipartisan, that the government can issue a CBDC without Congress acting. This is based on Article 1, the coins and coinage power of Congress. We've delegated that to the Treasury, and then the Treasury since 1913 has hired the Fed as its fiscal agent to distribute cash and coinage around the banking system. So we think it can't be done without an act of Congress. And there is, then the nuance is, what about an intermediated CBDC, a wholesale CBDC, not banking at the Fed? So this is a little murkier. And Jay Powell surprised everyone in Washington last week when he answered my question in his Humphrey Hawkins appearance, saying no, absolutely. Congress has to set the rules for a CBDC. I agree completely. And then he has this throwaway caveat that says, well, maybe not a wholesale CBDC. So this is the latest legal research project, Carol, in DC right now to see under what legal circumstances might Jay Powell make that assertion. Why did he do it so casually? And why has he never said that before? So those are sort of the pros and cons. Your final point. Yes, I think that would, at this stage, be disruptive to private sector innovation here. And I would say on the left, that's precisely what they want. Senator Elizabeth Warren doesn't want you innovating. She wants the government in charge. She wants the CBDC. She wants to eliminate private sector stable coins and any kind of a quote cryptocurrency. So it's a hot political topic right now. Again, we're going to try to bring sense to that and direction to it and try to keep that conversation bipartisan.
Absolutely, an incredibly important topic. The US dollar in a digital money world is one of GBBC's top policy topics in the US. And with $7.5 trillion, by the way, these are BIS triennial survey numbers, $7.5 trillion of foreign exchange goes through the markets every day. This is every day, of which 87%, if it's a cross-border FX leg, is 87% is the US dollar. So the reserve status of the US dollar is absolutely dominant right now. However, as you've mentioned, Representative Hill, it is not taken for granted and shouldn't be taken for granted. And frankly, how does the dollar exist as money digitizes? So that's a great point. Carol,
can I jump in?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that both China and Russia have made affirmative public statements that they don't like the prominence of the US dollar. And China probably is the leading nation in terms of having taken affirmative steps with beta testing and actual issuance of its digital yuan. So it has a CBDC in limited circulation. And not a model that the United States, I think, would ever want to follow. It obviously is the kind of thing that is very centralized, and that if the Chinese government decides, oh, you're outspoken against the government, they can close down your digital account. So it's very much controlled by the Chinese government, which is not a model that I think a Western democracy would want to follow. But they do have that. And for people who wanted a digitized version, who don't trust banks, although God knows why you'd trust the Chinese government instead of a bank. But if you did, that's moving in that direction. And Russia has said that they're going to go with a CBDC as well. And while I don't think that there's any private crypto asset that stands any chance of replacing the dollar as a reserve currency for the world, it is possible that if someplace like Switzerland or some the Australia was trying to do that, I don't think we can stand to just be on the sidelines and not aware of and participating in the potential that a CBDC has for decreased costs. It's expensive to market currency. It's expensive to market coins, and it's expensive to take all of the steps that you need to avoid counterfeits. And there are benefits to having a digitized currency that might be a good idea. So I'm glad we're developing it. My only guess as to why it might have been sort of a throwaway comment is sometimes folks go a little bit off script, and it might not have been fully thought through, because I think our Constitution pretty much tells us that Congress is responsible for money for currency. So my off-the-cuff remark is that I don't know why Jerome Powell said what he said.
Well, appreciate your thoughts on that. And We have actually blown through 40 minutes already, and we're heading into our last 10 minutes, and I did promise some Q&A, which actually does lead us into another topic I wanted to cover, which is digital identity. And we've actually gotten a question from, let's see here. We've got one that is from someone, Novak, saying, I'm interested in your guest views on digital identity, specifically the use of verifiable credentials on blockchain as a replacement for user ID passwords. Verifiable credentials provide granular user control over their personal data. Are corporations like FedEx and the Congress researching this topic? Any insights? Thank you. So Dale, I was just wondering if you had any thoughts that you'd like to address on the digital identity side, and obviously then Carol and Representative Hill.
Yeah, I would approach it this way. My sense is that a 10-year-old today, when they are an adult, is going to want to know where the coffee bean in the cup they're drinking came from, and whether the jeans they're buying are sustainable, and that, what the sustainability score is from the companies they frequent. And probably it'll go even further, not only a company sustainability score, but a personal sustainability score. And I'll be reaching out to the professor, asking her, how is your score higher than mine? And who do I need to change in terms of who I purchase from, and all those things to bump my score up. To accomplish that, we're going to need a foundational platform that connects all those dots securely, privately, scales globally, all the way from, in our example, FedEx to a bicycle delivery company. And that loops back to the question, which is, to get to that platform is going to require interoperability, secure identity, and utilizing things like decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and zero knowledge proofs. Absolutely. I'm nodding completely to that. That's where this is going. We've worked with U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security for multiple years, and they will nod to that as well. We know that we have to get to that point. One of the other things I want to add real quickly is that I don't have the expertise that anybody else on this panel has, but from my own perspective, call me naive, but I have really learned a lot about the gravitational pull of existing processes pushing back against technology like this. And so we can discuss it and debate it, and we need to at all levels, government, private, wherever the case may be. But the world is moving forward in this space. And we don't have the luxury of time to simply say, this is everything. This is just like what our granddad's technology has been. Let's treat it the same way. We can't do that, or we're not going to like where we end up. And we all want to end up in that same dominant position with the US dollar that was discussed by the other panelists.
I would add that I won't take the bait on all the sustainability scores, but I will agree with Dale that this is part of a foundational system that if you want to move to a digital future, when I mean a Web3 digital future, then some of the foundational things are there. And this is why Patrick McHenry introduced a nationwide privacy bill, building off Graham Leach Bliley, because we need a privacy statute that I don't want to, I know the Californians don't want me to say preempt state law, but I'm going to simply say we need a privacy bill that works for everybody, whether you're in the healthcare industry or the financial services industry. Secondly, we need to own our own data, which is fundamental to blockchain and what Dale outlined. And our privacy bill starts down that road of data ownership. You've seen experiments with this in the UK and also in the EU. And then finally, you need to, as George Gilder wrote in Life After Google, which is a great book, commend it to particularly the students listening, it's a elimination of username and password. And that should have happened a long time ago. But it hasn't, although you see bits and pieces of it when you're verified on certain transactions on your smartphone. So we do need a digital proof item, and it's evolving. And as Dale noted, you have it in your passport now, you have it in your driver's license in most states. And this is an issue for NIST, the National Institute of Standards in Washington, to think through. And this again gets into this privacy issue and surveillance issue. Let's set the standard and let's let the private sector roll with it. This is not, I have one of my colleagues, Bill Foster, this is his number one issue. number one issue. In fact, he can't talk about anything else. The conversation just grinds to a halt. But
Yeah.
but what we need to have is a standard, and then let the private sector and healthcare, financial services, government, security deal with it. That's sort of my philosophy about it. And I think it's really important if we're serious about Web3.
Yeah, and I would step in and say that from the standpoint of somebody who represents lawyers helping businesses do that, a clear regulatory path is the number one thing that can facilitate that.
So I have to say, digital identity is quite a popular topic. I got Sumaran asking Dale to start, but we'll do a round. How do we get government and private organizations to create interoperability globally? Do you think that is feasible right now?
Well, I think in our work with U.S. Customs and Department of Homeland Security, that's the very first word they would start with, interoperability. It has to be. And we are technology agnostic from a FedEx point of view. We keep our eyes and ears open to the whole thing, but it's all going to have to come together. As I would say, one of the luxuries I have is that I work for a company that goes to 220 countries and territories. So my default position is essentially the International Space Station. At that level, there is no FedEx, there is no industry, there are no borders. Data knows no geographic borders. And I don't think there's enough people thinking of this at the truly global level yet. We're still thinking local or state or country, whatever the case may be, but 220 countries, it's going to have to come together from that point of view. And it's going to have to be open. We think it's an open platform. We've been saying that since 2019. We don't think it will be private and permissioned. We don't think that will scale in global commerce. So I think it's a pragmatic view at this point for us to simply say, let's put our heads together. Where can we agree? I mean, FedEx, UPS, and DHL are actually part of the same trade association. And in 2019, we sat on stage together. And then later that year, we put together a position paper and call to action to World Customs and World Trade to simply say, let's put this together. This distributed ledger technology is the future. World Customs gets it. They've got a paper out. World Trade gets it. We just need to accelerate this. We need to get beyond the fact that I'm on one side of an aisle or somebody else is on something else and look at this broader issue and simply say, look, this is the future. And we can either be part of that or we can watch somebody else jump ahead of us. And then we're going to have to all react to it without thinking through it like we would like to.
Yeah. And there's another point I'd like to raise there, which, and then we'll go to lightning round to close up. But I think one thing that is interesting is the conversations that we're seeing around the world about who gets to write the rules around standards beyond the legislative piece. There's also obviously the importance of the legislative piece, but when you're talking about global standards, it's also very important who gets to drive that conversation. And I think it's incredibly important. If American firms aren't there, if there aren't American voices there, then someone else writes those rules. That's going to be very hard to then change them if people adopt them over time. And so, Dale, it's very good that you're working with your counterparts around the world to enable that. Are there any views, Carol, that you might have from just the fact that this stuff is so borderless and it's a challenge?
There are a number of different groups working on different pieces of the puzzle, putting different standards in place. The reality is that if we had a clear system, I do think we've got plenty of intellect interested in moving forward. It's the lack of certainty as to how that will be perceived and whether that will be accepted that I really think is causing people to take smaller steps right now. I mean, it's easy to see, at least in part, where we want to go. It's a lot harder to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, dear esteemed panelists, we have many more questions than we're possibly going to address. So we're going to leave some of our folks feeling probably a little bit dissatisfied. So what we'll do is we'll take these questions and we will send them over to you. And if you would care to have your teams respond, we'll be happy to send them back out to the folks that have asked. We tried to do our best to reply to questions. I will give you the lightning round. So any last thoughts you have in the last few minutes? We'll start with Rep. Hill. What do you think in terms of positive parts of where the US can lead. I think we could always go on and say the US is falling behind, the US is falling behind, but what active, positive things can we do as the United States and the various stakeholders? What needs to happen in order for us to accelerate innovation and also in particular blockchain and digital assets? So over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sandra, and thanks my fellow panelists and the University of Arkansas for helping pull this together. It's been great. And I would urge people, if you have more questions or want to talk more, just you can reach me at hill.house.gov and would welcome the interaction and the future questions. I want to leave it like this. I'm arguing we need a regulatory framework that's transparent so the private sector can innovate safely and soundly for investors and developers and consumers in this blockchain distributed ledger space, including the idea of a tokenized payment. And that's what I'm going to spend the next 2 years working on. And we need to have this attitude of first kind of do no harm, which is not the policy of the Biden administration. And that needs everyone pushing back and asking leaders there to take a breath and think back in the 1990s. If we'd had this kind of an attitude in the 1990s, we might not have reaped the last 25 years of benefit through the internet. Congress voted in 1996, 400 and something to 0, basically, or 1, to not tax the internet, not over-regulate the internet, and just tax and regulate the activity on the internet. And that was brilliant. But Paul Krugman, the very progressive left side of the equation economist who's in all of your newspapers every week, let me tell you what Paul Krugman said about the internet in 1998, and I'll leave you with this. He said the internet isn't going to contribute any more to productivity or benefits than the fax machine. So I'll let that sink in next time you're reading some advice from Paul Krugman. I thank you for letting me participate in the panel and look forward to seeing everybody in the future. And thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And Carol, your final words.
Yeah, putting myself for just a brief moment in trying to put myself in the position of understanding why Elizabeth Warren and folks like her seem so hostile towards crypto. Crypto assets in the headline sense have been cryptocurrencies. And unlike a lot of commodities, they are used as investment vehicles. They are adopted more prominently by underserved individuals, by minorities who are not familiar with and are not protected by as many financial security blankets. So I'm really interested in being protective and not letting them be harmed. And, you know, attributing really good motives to her reaction is very paternalistic, that I know better than them what is right for their financial picture. And unfortunately, that response has permeated enough of what has actually happened that we now run the risk of pushing innovation away from the United States. And that is a horrible thing to do because it minimizes whatever positive influence we would otherwise be in a position to exert. Yes, there are some fraudsters in this space. Yes, there are oracles that don't work. Yes, there are crypto assets that are scammed. Yes, there are phishing expeditions. Yes, there are privacy problems, but there is such tremendous potential if it's not just a matter of getting out of the way and doing no harm, because then you don't know what the rules are. So it's a matter of affirmatively, proactively trying to create an environment where it is safe and possible to innovate in a way that is compliant, and that we have not yet achieved. And so that's what I am looking for and hoping for.
Thank you for all the work that you are doing, Carol, and we look forward to working with you further. Dale, over to you. You get the last words.
Well, it's been my honor to be part of this. Thank you so much. And I'm going to loop back to the state of Arkansas. So I know we talked a little bit about this, but as a proud graduate of the University of Arkansas and a former resident of Arkansas, I know we've got a lot of students and a lot of people associated with the university as part of this. I would say welcome this technology with open arms, regardless of political ideology. In Arkansas and every other state, you want to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. You want your college students to stay in Arkansas to get their degrees. As we've discussed, University of Arkansas is one of the very few universities with a blockchain center of excellence, and also one of the few curriculums where you can actually learn about co-opetition that I've been talking about. And as we've discussed several times, Dr. Mary Lassity is a pioneer in this space. My sense also is that Arkansas is in a really unique situation with the U.S. congressman from the state capital area who speaks this language fluently, and with a major university who speaks blockchain fluently. And if you can align on what true north is in this space for Arkansas, I think you can fairly quickly work together to accomplish all kinds of goals and be a leader in the United States. And again, with that, I can't thank you enough for honoring me to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Appreciate it, every single one of you, and we concur. We believe that Arkansas is a bright spot, and frankly, we need to keep shining a light on it because it is doing some amazing things. The University of Arkansas is doing amazing things, and we look to continue to support as GBBC. Thank you for joining us and appreciate your time. Bye.